Okay, so we've talked about how to create the alpha image in Blender. What we're going to go into next is how to render using an alpha image. Now, if any of you have seen things like trees and foliage in Second Life, basically all the leaves are made up from planes with a texture on them. So I went ahead and I downloaded from textures.com this leaf pattern. I think I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. This is all actually transparent behind it. It's just that Windows Viewer doesn't render transparency. But you can see it here. It's definitely an alpha image with transparency. Okay, so it's the same sort of setup, and I've still got my HDR setup there. Right, so I've added this plane and I've added the image to the plane. We can see that here, the image texture going to the diffuse. Just a basic node setup. Right, so if I select my plane and once again I'm going to delete these three nodes that make up the grid. So let me just delete those. Alright, oh, that was wrong, wasn't it? I did it in the wrong box. I deleted with my mouse here, so it deleted the actual plane. I just want to delete these three nodes, so let me delete those again. Right, so we've just got a basic plane. Alright, I can add ground shadow, for example. Just call it ground for now. Let's even turn off the alpha on it, it doesn't matter. Okay, and I can add this image down here to bake onto. So let's add an image texture and let's call it ground. Not call it, select it as ground. Okay, so I'm going to be baking the shadow from this leaf onto this ground. So let's go ahead and bake that. Where are we? Render view, come down to the bottom of bake. Right, I'm going to pause for a second while that's baking. Okay, we're nearly done and it's baked. And what you can see here quite clearly is the transparency in the leaf texture doesn't bake, and we can see that because it's baked this square plane on the texture down here. So to be able to use transparent textures, I mean, if you were making trees or a bush or ivy or something like that, you'd be using this kind of plane setup with the texture on it. But you don't want squares like this in your shadows. So to do that, let's select the leaf again. Let me just expand the node editor up a bit. And it's basically doing the same thing. We need to add a transparency shader into the node setup, so Blender knows that some of this is going to be transparent. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll Shift A and we'll add a shader and a transparent shader. Where is it? Down there. And we'll add a mix. Shift A. We'll add a mix shader. We'll pop that in there. And we always make sure that the transparent goes into the top of the two shader sockets whenever we're doing this. Same as we did just in the last video. Okay, now we can use the alpha from, let's select the leaf. We can use the alpha from this leaf, it's already in the texture, and use that to drive the mix shader. So this alpha is telling the mix shader what to render and what to make invisible. Okay, so if I come back to my plane again, and let's select my ground shadow there, and if I was to bake that again, which we'll do now, and I'm just going to pause while that's baking again. Okay, now it's baked. We can see that the Cycles engine has ignored the transparency. Well, not ignored it, it's actually gone straight through it, which is what we wanted, and it's left the outline of the leaf, and we can see that clearly here. Okay, well, since we got this ground shadow again, well, actually before that, let's just have a look at this in a different way. So let me select the leaf again, and let me delete these two nodes and reset it to the way it was. So basically the texture running into diffuse into the surface. Okay, and we go into a rendered view here. Okay, and once again we can see in render view that it will not penetrate the alpha mask. We need to add the transparency down here. So let's do that again real quick. So Shift A, add a transparent shader, and add a mix shader. We'll plug the transparency into the top socket, okay, and we'll plug the alpha into the mix factor, and now it's baking and rendering as we would expect it to. Right, where was I? Okay, yeah. I thought while we're here, we may as well just do the same operation we just did with the shadow to get the alpha. Just a bit of practice. So we'll come across to the compositor, which is here, and we'll make sure we use nodes, and we can delete these setup nodes. Okay, so first we can add a input image texture. We can add an output viewer. Okay, and let's use the backdrop here so we can see what's going on back here. If we plug the image into the viewer, we're seeing nothing because I haven't selected the image. Ground, there it is. Okay, so we see that. Alright, we wanted a color ramp to kind of make these blues black, so it's more of a shadow. So we'll add, and it was under, I can never, there it is, converter, never remember. So we'll add a color ramp here. And we also, last time we used hue saturation, but it doesn't look like we really need it here. We'll try it without. And we'll just bump up the color ramp, the blacks on the color ramp, see how that's looking. Yep, that's looking pretty good. Alright. So, from there, what did we need to do? We wanted it into the alpha, okay? But you see it's back to front because we're missing our inverter node. So we'll add a, I can never remember what these are, color invert. We'll just plug that in there. And the output into the alpha, and we've got this image again. We can then add a blur. So add, and that'll be under distort. Not seeing it there. Matte vector filter. It's always a blur filter. We can add a blur, and we can add some values in there. What's that? 29. Let's go 29 on this one as well. Okay, so now we go back to our viewer node. We've got this blur texture. I can save that again as leaf sh, making sure I've got the alpha selected this time. Okay, so if we come back to our shader setup, let's select the plane. We can add an image texture setup to this with Control T, and it's not saved there, so I need to open it from my hard drive. Open, and I called it leaf sh. There it is. Okay, so once again we need to add the transparency into this. So Shift A, add the transparent shader, add a mix shader, plug the transparency into the top socket and the alpha into the mix. And there you can see we've got this shadow underneath. This whiteness here is actually due to the actual leaf texture. If we look at it, we can see we've got some white areas on it. It's not truly transparent, but we're getting the idea. We've got this leaf and we've got the shadow. So we're using Blender to process the transparency with the help of the transparent and mix shader.